How can Russia possibly take on and defeat NATO? In Western mainstream media discourse, Russia is almost always presented as an unworthy opponent for the almighty West. The primary justification for this alleged Russian inferiority against NATO is always the dismissive, self-soothing presentation of Russia's relative economic weakness vis-a-vis NATO. As the disparity between the two in terms of economic size is more than substantial, the Western commentator or ostensible expert will conclude and declare that if NATO decides to concentrate even part of its strength against Russia, then the final outcome of the conflict would be a foregone conclusion. However, this line of reasoning is fundamentally flawed, and in this video essay I will explain why. Economic size is extremely important, but is not everything. Even though nobody denies that economic size and sophistication are highly relevant factors when determining overall state power, people seem curiously unaware that other factors are part of a broader state power equation as well. In all these other determining factors, Russia is the one in possession of overwhelming advantage. The first thing to note is that Russia's military expenditures are by now much higher than NATO's, when expressed in terms of percentage of GDP, as it's clearer to that country that they now find themselves in an existential war against the combined might of the Western world than it is for the populations and governing elites of the Western world. Secondly, and far more importantly, Russia's military spending is far more cost-effective when compared to that of the West. This is a fact well admitted by some of the more honest and intelligent Western commentators. The reasons for this are quite self-evident. Russia's labor, materials and energy costs are far lower than those of the West, and is not a stretch at all to claim that the markups on sales are far lower in the case of Russia than the West, where producers of military equipment are publicly traded companies, with investors and CEOs to enrich. Russia's military-industrial complex is much more streamlined by comparison. Even more importantly, a huge portion of Western military spending traditionally goes to branches of the military that are hard, if at all possible, to be used against Russia. A lot of funds flow into the building and maintenance of large surface fleets, designed to roam the world's oceans, but are of no value against Russia. This grave geopolitical reality, namely that Russia, due to her geography, is essentially impervious to naval power, was stressed by Sir Alfred Mackinder more than a century ago. Besides massive expenditures on naval assets, Western countries, and especially the U.S., have also long been deeply invested in the development of powerful air forces. The U.S. Air Force, for example, is at present, and has been since World War II, the world's most capable. It possesses the world's biggest number of aircraft, as well as the most advanced. However, 2 years into the Ukraine war, the U.S. and its allies have not dared transfer any of their vaunted Air Force equipment to the embattled Ukrainians. In my view, this reflects grave fears, on the part of NATO, over the actual matchup between their Air Force assets against Russia's formidable air defenses. Yet again, the economics favor Russia. Air defense procurement is simply much cheaper than the Air Force equivalent. Western powers also seem extremely anxious over the potential fallout over downed Western fighter jets over Ukraine. Such a development would create a huge dent on the prestige of extremely expensive Western weaponry all over the world, and would provide Russia's own military-industrial complex with a massive informational victory. As things stand, the West's most formidable and expensive military branches seem of little to no use against Russia. In terms of land forces, always a relatively weak area for Western militaries, NATO seems more diminished than ever. NATO's land forces have been downsized in recent decades to a considerable degree. This is one of the main reasons why the West has to rely so heavily on Ukrainian manpower and sacrifice. Its own ground combat troops are largely non-existent. As this is primarily a land war, NATO's alarm and determination to keep the Russian forces as east as possible, for as long as possible, almost regardless of Ukrainian manpower losses, may be cynical, yet understandable. Even if NATO somehow found the political, economic, and societal will and determination to recruit and build up its own powerful land forces, they would still find themselves with a totally inexperienced, multinational force that has to somehow be deployed in the appropriate staging areas, and under Russia's very own satellite surveillance. This multi-ethnic and totally inexperienced force will at some stage have to come up against Russia's ever-growing and increasingly battle-hardened troops and formations. Russia's nuclear advantage. It's no secret that Russia possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. A nuclear arsenal that is equal to that of the combined West, in terms of the number of warheads. What is far less known, let alone discussed, is the fact that Russia's nuclear arsenal is also the most modernized, most diverse in type and potential application, and also boasts the most advanced delivery systems. Russian strategists were always well aware of the West's overall economic and technological superiority, which has been why they have always given special emphasis on weapon systems that could provide a cost-effective counter-capability against the West's most advanced weaponry. Russia's emphasis on numerical superiority in terms of tanks and artillery, as well as its special emphasis on air defenses and electronic warfare, has to be seen under this light. But from Russia's challenging strategic position, there can only be one ultimate guarantee for the state's survival in the face of implacable and permanent Western hostility. That guarantee is a more than credible nuclear deterrent. It is for this reason that Russia has never neglected her nuclear arsenal. Even during the catastrophic 1990s, the Russian government did its utmost in order to find the money and resources for the maintenance and even further development of Russia's nuclear arsenal. This nuclear arsenal includes not only thousands of strategic weapons that can be launched from submarines, silos, or road-mobile vehicles, but also thousands of tactical or battlefield nuclear weapons that can be utilized in all sorts of ways. They can be air-to-surface, surface-to-air, surface-to-surface, depth charges, sea mines, torpedoes, high-caliber mortars, and so on. Additionally, Russia has succeeded in developing and recently deploying an entire new generation of delivery systems for her nuclear warheads. This new generation of delivery systems mostly includes hypersonic missiles, such as the Kinzhal and Zircon, but also nuclear-powered cruise missiles, nuclear-powered autonomous torpedoes, hypersonic glide vehicles, and potentially space-based weapons. The existence and even partial deployment of these delivery systems has already been grudgingly acknowledged by NATO, which still lags behind in this department, as does China for that matter. In addition to all of the above, Russia's most important advantage in the case of nuclear warfare is, in my view, the nuclear escalation ladder. If nuclear war between Russia and NATO becomes reality, then Russia is the one with the most options in terms of where the level of escalation will reach. The oxymoron of relentless NATO expansion is that it has not only alarmed Russia into war, but even more crucially, that it has presented her with a rich variety of potential nuclear targets, to which the U.S., as the undisputed leader of the transatlantic alliance, has no good potential countermoves. Russia's strategists, all well aware that their NATO partners have their own internal hierarchy and heterogeneity. Would the U.S. risk a nuclear exchange with Russia for the sake of Poland and Romania? Would they do it for Germany, or even the EU as a whole? The U.S. may have succeeded in building a grand alliance that includes almost all European states, but what would, or what can they do, when the nuclear chips go down? What kind of escalation is each European state worth, to the U.S. itself, or to the rest of the alliance as a whole?